Okay, let's just get right into it because we are looking at something absolutely staggering today. We're talking about the shocking reality of how the U.S. justice system legally executed children for decades. We all like to think the law protects kids, right? But for the longest time, there were these terrifying legal black holes where those protections just completely vanished, leaving kids entirely vulnerable to the ultimate punishment.
We're talking about children as young as 14 being sent to the execution chamber. 14. And in some of these cases, their trials barely lasted longer than your average lunch break. It's like the second they turned 14, any semblance of childhood protection was just gone.
Section 1. The legal black hole.
So consider this massive legal cliff. Douglas Christopher Thomas was 17 when he shot his 14-year-old girlfriend's parents. But the records actually show that she was the mastermind behind the whole thing. Because Chris was 17, he was executed. But because she was 14, literally just sitting under that legal cliff, she only served 7 years and walked free at 21.
And this total lack of protection essentially turned the U.S. into a global pariah. Think about this. Back in the 90s, the only other nations executing minors were Iran, Nigeria, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. The United States was a developed country, completely ignoring UN conventions on human rights.
Section 2. A history of precedents.
Now, this precedent was set really early on. Way back in 1642, a 17-year-old was actually hanged in the Plymouth colony. Fast forward a bit to 1927, and a 16-year-old named Fortune Ferguson Jr. was the one to test out Florida's brand new electric chair. And then, amazingly, even as late as 1989, the Supreme Court ruled that executing 16 and 17-year-olds didn't violate standards of decency.
Section 3. Panics and coerced confessions.
You also have to factor in mass hysteria. During the satanic panic of the 1980s, 16-year-old Sean Sellers was tried as an adult for a triple murder, completely ignoring his documented brain damage. The media was in an absolute frenzy over Dungeons and Dragons at the time. The judge actually refused to let experts testify about child development, and the prosecutor literally argued that picking up a gun magically made Sean a man. He was executed in 1999.
What's really shocking here is how the system entirely ignored mental capacity. You know, that fundamental ability to actually understand the consequences of your actions. Take the 1936 case of Joe Aridi. Functionally, Joe was a child. He couldn't even read or write. Yet somehow, the police managed to produce this long, detailed written confession that he signed with just an X.
Joe had an IQ of 46. He literally went to the gas chamber playing with a toy train, completely unaware that the state was about to end his life. And get this, even after the surviving victim woke up and identified a totally different man, who was also caught and executed, by the way, the state still killed Joe. A newspaper headline even called him happy. But he wasn't happy. He just had absolutely no idea what was happening.
Section 4. Speed over justice.
So, we all know double jeopardy is supposed to protect you from being prosecuted twice for the same offense. But it sure didn't save 16-year-old Willie Francis. In 1946, he was strapped into the electric chair by a guard who was reportedly drunk. The machine botched the execution. But the Supreme Court stepped in and ruled that putting him back in the chair wasn't cruel and unusual punishment.
Take it off. Let me breathe. Those were Willie's exact screams from under the leather hood during that first failed attempt. And the executioner actually yelled back, "You're not supposed to breathe, boy." Willie was brought back a year later, and that time the machine worked. It's the ultimate nightmare, right? The state essentially demanding a do-over on a child's life. Then there's 14-year-old George Stinney, who was railroaded to the electric chair in a process that took barely 84 days. He was arrested and interrogated with no parents present and no lawyer. He faced a 2.5-hour trial with absolutely zero defense, and just 84 days after his arrest, at 5'1" and 90 pounds, he was executed.
And Stinney wasn't an isolated case. The state would actually lie about the ages of other 14-year-olds just so they could execute them faster. Records show that boys like Irving Hatchett and Nathaniel Walker were actually 14, but official logs listed them as 15. It was outright deceit, just to avoid the public shame of executing someone so young.
Section 5. The Supreme Court shift.
Finally, things shifted. The landmark 2005 Roper v. Simmons ruling deemed executing minors unconstitutional. The Eighth Amendment now fully applied to children. Almost overnight, 72 death sentences were overturned. Texas had to transfer 29 juvenile offenders off death row, and Alabama commuted 14 sentences. The executions finally stopped.
Section 6. The modern loophole. But here's the catch. The system didn't really end the practice, it just replaced the death penalty with JLWOP, juvenile life without parole. Now, while the Supreme Court later ruled that mandatory life without parole for kids was unconstitutional, it didn't actually ban the practice entirely. It just meant judges had to factor in a kid's age before condemning them to die behind bars.
So despite those Supreme Court limits, a huge chunk of the country still uses this modern loophole. Sure, 27 states have banned it, and 9 currently have no young offenders serving it. But that leaves 14 states that actively allow children to be sentenced to spend their natural lives in a prison cell, with absolutely zero possibility of ever getting out.
To put that in perspective, today, nearly 1,500 people are locked away right now with no hope of release for crimes they committed as children. Some of them were as young as 13 at the time. So yes, the literal machinery of death was dismantled for minors, but the absolute finality of their punishment, that hasn't gone anywhere.
Which really leaves us with a lingering, pretty uncomfortable question. If children are still condemned to die behind bars, did we actually fix the system? We basically traded the electric chair for a lifetime locked in a cage. It really forces us to ask whether the legal black hole for children ever truly closed or if it just got a new name.